Welcome, travel junkies and adventure seekers, to episode number 3. I had a blast interviewing some of the greatest adventure seekers this week. However, there are many people watching who are working in traditional business jobs back home, from marketing to finance to management, who have specialized skills and actually enjoy what they do. However, they may be getting tired of routine, getting burnt out from the same environment, or just have an itch to explore the world. Today, I wanted to bring light on how some people are taking their business skill sets and pursuing international opportunities to work and live abroad. Not only do they get a chance to explore new cultures and sites, but they also add value to their organizations they join by bringing different perspectives and skills. Today on the show, we'll be having Mr. Stephen Proud, Global Marketing Director of Brandigo, on our show to discuss his experiences living and working in Shanghai, China. Ni hao ma, Stephen, how are you?
Ni hao, wo shi hen hao. Nina?
Wo hen hao.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well. It's reminding me of some of the Chinese I learned during my 3 months studying in China during my global MBA program. Our Chinese teacher would just sit there and laugh while we tried to pronounce the Chinese word, and she would actually particularly harp on me because of my Korean accent she said I had. So
mine was better in Beijing because Beijing has a sound in it, and you get that with my native Liverpool accent as well. So yeah. My Chinese was better when we lived up north.
That's fantastic. You got the Liverpool, Beijing accent, while I got the Seoul, Chicago accent in Chinese. But it's fantastic having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and tell us a little bit about your story and experiences and your journey to how you got to Shanghai. We wanted to start off with the elephant in the room, and if you can maybe just tell us about the situation currently in Shanghai.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on as well, man. I've been looking forward to doing this. So I guess we're about 2 months ahead of the rest of the world, I think. So we're sort of starting to come out the other side now. Right before the Chinese New Year, around the 25th, 26th of January, things started to get a little bit serious here. And within days, the whole country was in lockdown. And lockdown in China was no joke. People were literally staying in their apartments for weeks. We're lucky in the neighborhood we live in. There's a little bit of quiet, open space. But we had about 7 weeks, I think, of virtually not going outside. Maybe one trip to the supermarket for me. We've got a 2-year-old as well. So I got really good at making little assault courses all the way around the apartment. We're putting like superhero outfits on and Indiana Jones theme tune music and chasing each other and stuff. So we had to get creative with that. One of the things that was really interesting was the technology that China brought into play as well. So we have this, I'm going to kind of treat it as if the two big mobile channels that we use here, WeChat and Alipay. I guess if you've not been to China, you won't be that familiar with them, but they're ubiquitous everywhere you go here. Via my Alipay account, I got a health code, which was like a little QR screen on my phone. In fact, I can show you guys what it looks like. And mine is green because I never left China. I self-quarantined. I had my temperature checked everywhere I go. When this was introduced, this QR code lets me get the subway as usual now. It lets me get into my office. It lets me go back into my gym. Lets me go into all the hotels and the shopping malls and things like that. So we're starting to get back to regular daily life. Schools are still closed. But everything else, like I said, I've been in office for about 3 weeks now. I've been in the gym open 2 weeks ago. Cinemas have been opened. Bars and nightclubs, not so much, but restaurants are opening again. So yeah, it was quite an intense couple of months, but it was fascinating to see everybody coming together. a lot of the things that they do here, and we'll talk about this, I think, when we talk about some of the subtleties of living in China, you wouldn't get it anywhere else. The QR code thing that I was talking to you about.
Mm-hmm.
When I take the subway now, here, this is mine. Can you guys see that?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that code now, it's green.
Mm-hmm.
When I get the subway in the morning, I scan another QR code on the subway. If anybody who was riding in the same subway car that I was in at the same time, I will get an alert on my phone if their health status changes. So straight away, I'll get a text and an update, and it says, you were in this carriage at 9 o'clock this morning. There was somebody else in that carriage. Please take precautions, or please self-isolate and stuff like that. So the use of data, the tracking of data, the use of mobile tech to combat, it's way more than anything that I saw being done in the UK.
Yeah, just wanted to follow up, just to have a clear understanding. You're saying you're getting stamped and people are checking your temperature. Where is this happening, and who's doing it? Are these government officials or are these automatic stations?
It's a bit of everything. So when I go to my office in the morning, and the security guard on the office takes my temperature, checks my code. I give him my phone number, name, where I'm going to be, which room I'm going to be in. When I leave the office, I go to the gym. The security guard on the building that the gym's in, he does the same thing. When I get into the subway, they've got heat scanners as I go into the subway, and I show my code there. When I come home, I get out of my building, and the security guys on our compound, because we live in a neighborhood of high-rise buildings, the security guards will take my temperature as well. So I'm having my temperature taken like 6 or 7 times a day at the moment.
Yeah. And I think we discussed this a little bit earlier. We were talking about kind of the cultural differences. I mean, how are the Chinese people responding to these kind of new measures, or the government enforcing these kind of measures? Are they kind of really resilient, or are they following along and all kind of, rallying behind the cause?
Rallying behind the cause, following along. The government is very skilled when you need to pull the nation together at a time of kind of security or whatnot. The government is very good at stirring up national pride, stirring up a sense of community and a sense of neighborhood, being strict where they need to be strict as well. So we've seen footage online of the government using drones to kind of fly down on people who are walking down the street with no face mask on. And straight away, it's kind of put your face mask on from this drone that's chasing somebody down the street, right? So it's a little bit of both, but people are much more about a collective here, I think, and compared to a lot of countries that I've lived in and worked in. So they're more happy to toe the line through both carrot and stick kind of measures, if you like. People, things like face masks, even before the crisis, most people would ride the subway with a face mask. And they have done ever since the SARS outbreak, which was 2008, I think. You go through a Chinese airport, people are wearing face masks even. So it's a normal sight. It's not something that would freak you out or anything like that. So I know we're going to talk about this later, but it's a very, very different system and culture, and all of that mixes together to make, the reaction completely different to what you maybe get in the States or what we get in the UK or something like that.
Yeah, and I just think about this when you're saying these drones chasing you, reminding you of your mask. I can only imagine the kind of responses we take in the United States, where people would, they would be up and on. They would be shooting the drones down. This drone is not going to be on my property. I'm taking this one out. And it will be sold on Amazon a couple hours later.
Like a trophy, like one of those heads. And the hunting.
No one will encroach on the freedom wall. The freedom trophy will just be all the drones you've taken down. But so you don't really see any kind of people kind of fighting back against these measures from the Chinese government. Is that right?
No, haven't seen anything like that. There's been some high-profile stories of expats doing that kind of thing, and that works in the government's favor a little bit, because the message that they've got at the moment is that they've done a lot to combat the the virus.
Mhm.
And it's people who are coming in from overseas now that are potential to have it rear its ugly head again. So as of last Friday, no foreigners are allowed to enter China at all, regardless of
Wow.
your visa status or anything like that. We never
Wow.
left, so that rule doesn't impact on me at all.
Wow.
If you, I think over the last couple of weeks, if you came back and you were checked at the airport, if you had symptoms, you were given a government quarantine, or if you'd been into a hot zone. If you were just coming back into China, you had to do 14 days self quarantine at home. And
Mhm.
different neighborhoods reacted differently because it's the local neighborhoods that manage it. So our neighborhood is there. It's been pretty relaxed.
Mhm.
My little boy speaks really good Chinese, so everybody in the neighborhood knows him. Like the little blonde 2-year-old that speaks Mandarin, everybody recognizes him. They know we hadn't gone anywhere, so everyone was really, really cool and relaxed.
Mhm.
Some people who I work with or who I'm friends with, who maybe when the virus hit, they decided to bug out. Plus, it
Mhm.
was Chinese New Year, so a lot of people had 3 weeks off when all
Yeah.
this started. So they were leaving the country anyway. When they come back, there's been quite a lot of restrictions for the first 14 days they'll be back. Some neighborhoods, they are putting tape on people's doors and putting motion sensors on the door so they know if you're breaking your quarantine.
Oh,
But the
wow.
neighborhoods have been really nice with it. Like they will bring your shopping once a day. They will bring your takeaway to your door and knock on your door, and they will take your trash every day. So you leave it outside your door and they'll take your trash down for you.
And
We
who is
have
and who is doing this? Just to clarify, this is government workers that are doing this, or?
Yeah, so it kind of trickles down. So you've got central government who run it, and then you'll have the provincial governments, and then there's the city government, and it goes all the way down to district, right down to the neighborhood. So our
Okay.
neighborhood has a committee, which is mostly volunteers and
Mhm.
and the security guards. So they're the ones who are acting on the policy that comes down from above.
Wow. So these volunteers are risking their lives and their health in order to help combat the. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
This is kind of interesting. As I
absolutely.
mentioned, when I was living in China, I really felt this collective spirit, which is something we'll discuss a little bit later in the show. But that is phenomenal to hear that. So some of the technology they're using, you said thermal scanners. They're using scanning the codes. Where are they scanning your temperature of your head? Where is this happening? Not sure if we lost you. I know you mentioned earlier that you might be having a little bit lag with the great firewall up there. We'll give you a couple of minutes. So as Stephen was kind of describing earlier, he was discussing how the Chinese measures taken towards combating the virus have been really serious, and they were using lots of technology, including the thermal scans of people walking in through subways and gyms to make sure that no one had a fever. They were having the QC code on your phone, which gave you a green light, which allowed you to travel throughout different places, meaning that you were okay. He also mentioned to me earlier that they did put motion sensors on your door. So if you were quarantined or you were at risk of having the virus, that they would be able to track you. And that was something we discussed earlier about the cultural differences, how China is able to take these measures because of the collectivism of the Chinese culture, of everyone kind of working together in order to fight this bigger issue. And we discussed kind of how, Stephen is from the UK and I'm also from the United States. So we have a really society full of individualism. And so, we know that the responses in the United States and the Western world are going to be a lot different than the way that the Chinese were able to respond. So we were kind of discussing this earlier, and I actually spoke to Stephen today via video, and he was actually in his office, and it seemed like life went back to normal, at least for him. He showed me his office, and the workers everyone was there, and it seemed like life kind of went back to normal, which was a really uplifting sign, knowing that they've kind of overcame that hump, they've overcame the challenges, and life will eventually go on and come back to normal once we overcome these unfortunate circumstances that we're under at the moment. And unfortunately, at the moment, the United States will most likely be having the most difficult situation in the next 1 to 2, 3 weeks, based on the briefings I've been following the last couple of nights. So I will really be pulling for everybody back home to kind of stay home, keep themselves following the policies of social distancing. So hopefully we can save lives, because we don't have the same kind of, processes that that they have in China. But, of course, we have our liberties and our freedoms that we're also we prioritize very much. I'm going to wait here a couple more minutes until Stephen comes back, because he did mention that it is a very high likely possibility that he might have some tech issues, because he's using Facebook, which of course is banned in China, and he's also using a VPN wall. So he said that he might be having some tech issues. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story with China. So originally, when I was living in South Korea, I actually had no interest in visiting China, to be honest with you. I was more interested in visiting Japan and Indonesia and Vietnam. And China, for me, for some reason, was just kind of, I just envisioned poverty, or just not really something that really made me excited. I never even heard my friends like, oh, I can't wait to go to China. But during my master's studies, during our MBA program, we spent the summer in Dalian, China, at the Dongbei University on the northeast corner of China, a little bit close to North Korea. Dalian's on a little peninsula over there. And it was a fantastic experience. I really, really enjoyed it. I was actually blown away by the culture and the sights, the food. And it was a little bit like the wild, wild west out there. But the first thing that I noticed, of course, was when we went out there, we were all paired with a Chinese buddy from the university who helped us secure housing, because it's difficult, of course, to get an apartment in China if you can't speak Chinese. And so our Chinese buddies picked us up at the airport, which is unheard of. I can't. This kind of kindness was surprising. So I was picked up by my Chinese buddy. We went to get hot pot, and we had a good time meeting each other. And then, of course, she set up my apartment. So it was a great experience to move into a completely foreign country, and someone just to take you in with open arms and help you get a phone plan and get you situated. And I was kind of blown away. And a couple weeks later, as these kind of cultural differences started to come out, like one of the first things that we were told is that you have to notify the police of where you're staying within 24 hours of arriving in China. So you have to give them an address. And of course, we were hesitant, and this was something that we were not used to. But as the weeks came along, you start adjusting to the different environment. So, for example, you couldn't use Facebook, you couldn't use Gmail, you couldn't use Google, but you find ways around it. You get VPN walls, and you learn to adapt pretty quickly to these circumstances. And I was actually invited to a birthday party by my Chinese buddy, and we went and got hot pot and had some really good food. And I actually tried one of the most, and I don't mean to offend anybody, one of the most strangest and least tastiest foods I've ever had in my life. It was fermented soy, I believe. It was a black soy that was fermented, and oh my gosh, it was something new that I've never had in my life. But I tried it, and it was something new. But the question I had while I was at that birthday was, I was curious, asking these locals how they feel living in China, and some of the policies they have, like the one-child policy, and these kind of what we as Westerners would believe is an infringement on our individual liberties, and how they viewed it, not being able to use Google and these kind of different policies. And they said the government is the way it is, and we don't really care so much, and we just live our lives. And so that was kind of the theme I got when I kind of kept meeting more and more people. Was, yes, the government might have certain policies in place, but people don't really get so worked up about most of these. And actually, my buddy turned to me. She said, we have 1.4 billion people. I can completely understand why the government had a one-child policy. They really didn't need to, really need any more people here. We already have enough people as it is. So it was interesting their perspective and view towards the government while we were there. Some of the other experiences I had that I really enjoyed were just meeting locals. The locals were extremely friendly. One of my favorite things to do was just go on the beach. And once we go on the beach there, local Chinese people would ask us to come join them for their picnics and share their food and drink with us. And of course, we weren't really speaking Chinese that well, and they weren't speaking English that well. And so we would use WeChat in order to communicate, just translating to each other. But they were extremely friendly towards us, which was really uplifting and a great feeling when you are in such a foreign land. The other thing I wanted to also mention was kind of the paradox in China that kind of really was intriguing to me. Was while we were taking these history courses of China and how they always had such a big fascination with the environment, I was blown away because this country that Chinese country, in the last 40 years has been, number one priority was economics, with, big consequences for the environment, a lot of pollution, air pollution. And it's interesting to me how they have this yin and yang where they really care about the environment, and they have poetry, and they have thousands of years of really being with balance and harmony with the environment, but yet they have this insane, air pollution and pollution towards the environment. And it's like this yin and yang paradox. And I found this a lot to be the theme when I was living there. It's the same thing with some of the liberties. So when I was living there, I kind of felt really restricted by not being able to use Google and Facebook and them monitoring where I'm living. But on the other hand, I also felt this complete freedom, this wild, wild west that you can go anywhere you want, do what you want, that we just kept offsetting it. And I kept seeing these paradoxes while I was living there. Oh, look at that. Steve, are you back?
I hope so. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. I heard that you ran out of beer over there and you went to the grocery store. I was boring you.
Dude, they deliver. I don't have to go out or anything.
Actually, speaking of delivering beer, I was actually fascinated by some of the technology when I was living in China. I mean, almost, I don't know your experience in Shanghai, but when I was there, almost nobody uses cash. Like cash is like, nobody uses cash. I mean, sometimes you can't even buy food because everyone is using, was it WePay that they were using, or WeChat?
So the two main apps is WeChat and Alipay. So Alipay is, as it sounds, it's like it's a mobile payment platform. WeChat is similar. So people describe WeChat as like a social media app, messaging app, and it's so much more than that. So my typical day, let's say I leave the house in the morning, and I will go downstairs, and I have a 10-minute bicycle ride to the subway station. So I go into WeChat and I unlock a shared bike using the mini program within WeChat. I pay for it with WeChat. I cycle to the subway. I get on the subway. I use WeChat to get onto the subway as my ticket, or Alipay. I sit down. I chat to my friends. I catch up with some guys in work. I make a video call to Victoria because maybe she'd already left by the time I'd gone out. Then I'll order my coffee to pick up from the coffee shop at the ground floor of the office without using WeChat. So it's like the Swiss Army knife of mobile apps.
Yeah. Yeah, that was insane. I even see it when I'm abroad in like Thailand and other places. I thought I saw people accepting WeChat payments, which to me was fascinating. This technology was moving everywhere. And I mean, this isn't the same kind of level in the United States where cash is still used. I mean, I'm serious. Like there are places in China you cannot use cash. They don't even take cash. It's like silly, Everything's digital transactions.
So Alibaba, which is like, I guess you describe it as the Chinese Amazon, but it really does a little bit more than that. They have their own supermarket business called Herma Hippo, and it has its own app. So you kind of order your shopping, pay for your shopping, go and collect your shopping or have it delivered without touching cash or without touching your wallet. I can go a whole week without looking at my wallet. these days because it's all on the mobile tech.
Yeah. And that's not from you not wanting to see how much money is in there. That's just you don't need to see it, right?
I've got a 2-year-old. There's never any money in there.
Speaking of, is there any other technology that you kind of found fascinating when you got there? You were saying there's beer delivery services. Is anything else that it was kind of like when you first saw it, you're like, wow, this is something I've never experienced before?
So China's always been, in my experience, in my time here, China's very much an early adopter of all things tech. 5G is the thing at the moment, which is enabling a lot of the mobile channels and platforms that we talked about to be able to function as well as they can. You've got to think like most people's experience of internet in China, they kind of skipped a generation. Even the kind of elderly who wouldn't have had a computer and wouldn't have had a laptop as they were growing up have gone straight to it. Probably didn't have a mobile phone when you and I had mobile cell phones, have gone straight to the smartphone. So their first experience, be it an 18-year-old or an 18-year-old, of accessing the internet and accessing the technology is via a smartphone. So they're just super connected to them, and it's part of their everyday life for them.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that was also kind of some of my experience when I was living in Korea. I kind of also felt like the tech was a couple steps ahead what was going on in the States. Like I remember just getting into your door, everything was keyless. Like everything you always was electronic, and you go back home and everyone's still using the key. So that is interesting how they're kind of at least having a couple steps ahead and doing their own system.
But we were talking before we lost the feed. We were talking about the combating the virus here, and mobile tech and the mobile platform very much part of China's strategy to combat that. So much so that I think they've got that much of my data now. They're probably not going to want to give it up afterwards. But I've got nothing to hide.
That's good. All right. Well, I'm glad that you're safe and sound. Thank you so much for sharing that, because we knew that was going to be an elephant in the room and people were going to be really curious.
Right?
Yeah. I also mentioned while you were away that we had a video call earlier today, me and you were in your office over there in Shanghai, and it seemed like everyone was like life kind of back to normal. Everyone was working in the office, and is that kind of the vibe that's going on in Shanghai right now?
Yeah, so it's a long weekend this weekend. It's like in the UK we call it a bank holiday. I guess it's like Labor Day weekend or something like that in the US. Tomorrow, me and my family will take a bike ride along the river. There's public places, there's public sandpits that my kid goes crazy for, and then we'll go and have some lunch and cycle home. And yeah, that's we can't go to the karaoke bars and we can't really go to the cinema, but other than that, there's pretty much no restrictions now, as long as we stay in Shanghai.
Yeah, fantastic. So there's no intercity movement, or are there any domestic flights?
There's domestic flights, but depending on where you're traveling around, you might. So if I went to Beijing, for example, I might have to do some self-isolation and some quarantine. Other than that, yeah, we're pretty much. I mean, life's back to normal, but there's not a lot of travel or intercity transportation or anything like that going on. But it's, the flip side, it's not a particularly sensible time to do that anyway.
Yeah.
We've just started to get Shanghai back to normal. I don't think anybody wants to risk that just yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And where are you getting your information from? Like you just said, you might have to self-quarantine if you went to Beijing, or, people are telling you to have to download these apps. Where is this information coming from? Do you guys have your own briefings every day with your own Chinese Dr. Fauci giving you advice?
I mean, there's Western-owned media, foreign-owned media within China. There's dedicated WeChat news channels and news providers. There's the state media, and important news will be issued in English. And yeah, I mean, it's again interesting. The government has used social media and relied on social media kind of trickling amongst the wider population to pass on the messages about what the rule changes are, what the restrictions are, when they've been lifted, and things like that too. So again, all via mobile phone, via WeChat and Alipay.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I was just telling people while you left that it was an uplifting moment and optimism of seeing you this morning working in your office, knowing that life is going back to normal. I was just discussing how I think the worst hopefully is over for you over there in China, and it's just starting to hit the U.S. and it probably will be a pretty rough next couple of weeks as we are trying to make our way over the hump. But it was uplifting to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that you guys have overcame it, and that you guys are slowly coming back to normal routine and normal life.
Yeah, for sure. We had none of the food shortages. I'm going to have to ask you, nobody in China understands this. What's up with the toilet paper?
We have to use the restroom a lot.
Well, all right. But like, I mean, we had a tough couple of months. There's always like a little bit of underarching anxiety, which never goes away while you're doing the self isolation. So it is tough. It's great now and it's getting better. We're still vigilant, still taking our temperature, still washing our hands, still wearing face masks if they're in crowded places. But you're right, life is moving on now.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. That is great. I mean, honestly, I'm usually an optimist, and I like seeing the positive side of things. And I'm really happy that there is this light at the end of the tunnel, because if you're reading the media back home, it just seems like this never-ending, like restrictions, and you can't do this. And when they first they closed the NBA down, that's when I knew things were getting serious. And then the toilet paper was gone, and just one thing after another. And it's good to see that there is hopefully light at the end of the tunnel, and that we're going to be able to kind of get over this together, and that we'll also be on the other side of this when hopefully this passes through.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that. We're going to kind of move on towards our episode today. What we were going to talk about are breaking through the Great Wall of China. So I want to talk a little bit about your story, because you have an interesting story that we were discussing earlier today. Because I don't think 10, 15 years ago, or when you were 18 years old, you were saying, "Oh, I'm going to be living in Shanghai, China." No. How did this happen? Tell me a little bit about the story and how this started.
So this is, like I said, I think me and my family, we might be a little bit different from some of the guests that I've watched on the shows you've done so far. So Victoria and I, Victoria's my wife, we, going back, let me see, 2012, we were both doing the kind of the corporate thing. We were working as management. We were chasing the promotions. We were going to get married. We were going to buy a house. And then we just thought, hey, why don't we do a year abroad before we kind of have all of those things, before the roots go that deep? Let's do a year abroad. I wanted to volunteer at the Olympics. We had the Olympics in London that year, so it kind of all made sense that we could quit our jobs. I could go and do the Olympics for a few weeks. Victoria moved out to, well, we ended up in Seoul. So we just said, okay, fine. It was an overnight change for me. I'd always been kind of very career focused, like done a lot of traveling, but not for longer than maybe 5 or 6 weeks for any single trip. So like half a ski season or something like that. Victoria had lived abroad. She'd lived in Dublin in the past. She'd lived in Maryland for a couple of years as well. So she had to talk me into it, if I'm being kind of brutally honest, because I was like, well, I don't want to take a year out from my career, because my career's on this kind of trajectory. And then I just kind of think, well, that's, a wasted opportunity. So we made the decision. We were like, right, we'll do a year, and then we'll come back and we'll get married and we'll buy the house. And that was 8 years ago. So 1 year turned into 8 years, and I don't think we'll be going back to live back in the UK anytime soon.
Yeah, this is a reoccurring theme. I mean, same story for me. 1 year, I think we left around the same time. I left actually January 1st, 2013, planned for 1 year. So that's pretty interesting. But what I want to talk about, and I've been asking my guests the last week as well, is was there any kind of fear before you left? Because I know that when you're leaving from the UK, going to Korea, that first time, I mean, it's the unknown. You don't know what to expect. You don't know if you'll have friends. Were there any fears, and was it easier by going with a partner?
For sure, it was easier going with a partner. Yeah, absolutely. We both done, like I said, we've both done a lot of traveling. So I'd spent an extended period of time in the US. I'd spent an extended period of time in Canada. Living and growing up in the UK, it's a short hop to Europe. So you'd spend summers traveling around Europe and things like that. Victoria and I did a 4-week, 3-week trip in Vietnam a long time ago when Vietnam was like hardly experienced by foreigners. I'd done
Mhm.
Thailand maybe 20 years ago. I went to Thailand. So we've both done, so we weren't necessarily daunted by the travel. Having the
Mhm.
two of us together was a good kind of, yeah, we supported each other, but we're both quite outgoing people as well. I wasn't really worried about culture shock or making friends. That was kind of part of the fun. Part of the fun was
Mhm.
to go and be shocked and go and like push the comfort zone a little bit. If I'm
Mhm.
being brutally honest, I'd done nearly 15 years in business and I was burning out. I was
Mhm.
losing motivation, chasing what you think the most important thing at the time, and maybe it wasn't the most important thing, but you expected, or certainly with the way I was brought up, you expected to, you go to school, you go to university, and then you go to work, and that's it now until you're 65.
Mhm.
And I was kind of ready to kind of go down that road, and it wasn't working for me. So the
Mhm.
opportunity to go and have this time abroad was like let off a bit of pressure, make sure the job and the career that I had was what I actually really wanted to do as well. So it was a bit of a leap, but it was quite a therapeutic leap to take. It was good for me at that stage of my life to go and just get out of my comfort zone a little bit and try something different and try something new.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's really interesting because, at least for me and some of the guests I've had and some of my friends, you have this gut feeling that something's wrong. Like when I
Yeah.
was working right afterwards, I was like, something's not right. And I was just trying to suppress it and saying, just put your head down, just keep doing what you're doing. This is what you're supposed to be doing. But I couldn't get that feeling out that every day it was coming out like this is wrong. And, the older I got, the more I trust my instinct, knowing that it's telling me and it's guiding me on the direction I should be taking. So that's interesting that you have that same kind of feeling of, okay, something's not right. So you get to Korea and then you get to China, and we talked a little bit about this. Was that Seoul and Korea is kind of like a light Asia, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's a very westernized society. Like it almost is like an Asian New York. But once you get to China, I know that China is it's like the full experience. Tell me, how was that transition moving from Korea to China, and maybe some of the culture shock that came with it?
Like I said, I kind of mentioned the culture shock is part of the fun. Like, don't get me wrong, just moving from the UK to Asia, there's a lot of big difference culturally, socially. Um, I remember the first time we were in Vietnam, seeing some guy and his partner on a motorbike with a 10-foot fully decorated Christmas tree in rush hour traffic and stuff, which you just not going to see that on the old Kent Road in London in December. So anywhere you go, there's going to be that element of shock. But China can be quite full on in that. Not so much in kind of downtown Shanghai. Shanghai is probably the most foreigner friendly city in China. There's a lot of kind of former, like one of the big neighbors here is the former French concession. And
Mhm.
so that's, it's a bit more of a cosmopolitan city.
Mhm.
Beijing is completely different. I mean, that's the other thing about China as well. You can't judge China on the one place you've been. So you spent some time in Dalian, but
Mhm.
if you go and spend some time in the middle in Henan province, or if you head out east to Kunming in Yunnan, it's going to be completely different all over. Again,
Yeah.
completely different. So it's even now we've been in China, well, 6 years. I've been in China every day. At some point, something will surprise you, or you laugh, or shock you every single day, without
Yeah.
fail. And that
I
becomes
had
part of the reason why you stay here, is because you thrive on that. We like that. It's what makes it interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm only laughing because I'm also remembering my time in Dalian, and every time they're just every day you just, for example, are walking. I was walking to class, just listening to some music, and it would just be something completely different that I would be like, "Wow, well, I never thought I would see that in my lifetime, but I just did," and that's
Yeah.
fantastic. So, do you have any good stories where you can kind of share some of maybe some other kind of cultural shocks that happened to you?
Oh man, I don't know half the. I don't know if some of them I should be allowed to share. There's been a few interesting sites and a few different entertainment establishments. Like
Mhm.
I've seen a llama serving shots right in the middle of nowhere
A
in
llama.
yeah in a town called what was it called, Pingyao, which is like an old historic kind of touristy town right in the middle of Shanghai. And we were literally, I think there was 3 foreigners there, and everybody else was kind of local tourists. So
That,
we were getting a lot of
like,
attention, and the guy wanted us to go into the bar to see his llama. So that yeah,
wow.
and that that's by no means the dude. I ate a star
Oh, I think we might
complained too
have.
much.
Yeah. It sounds like something that you would see on a meme, right? Three guys walking into a Chinese bar getting served by a llama. This is great. I love this. But we discussed that China actually there's a lot of variety depending on what region you go to. I know you told me this earlier. It's kind of like the United States, where you know people from LA are very different from people from Austin, Texas, who are different from your snowbirds in Florida. There's a lot of variety, and for some reason, I believe that us Westerners, and correct me if I'm wrong, just have not lived in China, been to China, envision China as this one image, and they have like the big red flag, and this is China, that there's a factory and people are working, and that's kind of the only image they get of China. Did you
Yeah.
find this to be the similar situation with people from back home?
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots and lots of misconceptions, and it kind of ties back into one of the things that if you want to make the jump abroad and live in a country such as this, you're going to have to kind of manage how your family perceive the country that you're living in. So
Mm-hmm.
we had this when we were in Korea, and every time there's a little bit of saver in between the north and the south, we'd be in downtown Seoul and nobody cared. It's something that happened every day, but because it was maybe there was a political agenda at the time, it'd be all over the Western press. So
Mm-hmm.
my mum would be ringing up saying, "Are they flying rockets over the city? Do you know your bomb shelter?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's just not like that." Um,
Yeah.
and you get a China, because China is so polarizing in the kind of geopolitical world
Mhm.
and things like that. You have to not only manage your own perception and also kind of understand that everywhere you go within China is going to be completely different from the last place that you go. But you're also going to have questions from your relatives at home and misconceptions and things like that. And, going through
Yeah.
what we've just been through the last couple of months really crystallized that as well. The Western media made a big mistake in how they reported on the virus, because all of a sudden they had to backpedal when it was on their doorsteps. So that's,
Mhm.
again, I mean, that's just, if you're going to come and live somewhere like China, it's something to be mindful of as well. It's not just how you perceive it, but it's how the folks you leave back home perceive it as well.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you anymore on that. I think we both came to Korea at the same time period. In 2013, there was actually a lot of tension that was going on between the North and the South during that time period. And I remember CNN articles were saying World War III is on the verge, Seoul is about to be scorched. And my mom also messaging me, like, because I had just begun my journey, saying, hey, you need to leave. You need to get out. If you don't want to come home, you want to travel, go somewhere else, anywhere in the world. But that's the place you don't want to be. And I remember going to my class the next day, and I was freaking out. I was going to my kids and saying, how can you guys be studying right now when we're about to be nuked? This desk isn't going to be here in like 5 minutes. And they're like, oh, Jordan teacher, don't worry about it. We don't really care. This guy's been saying this for the last 60 years. And that was mind-boggling to me. The perspective that was so different from what everyone back at home was thinking. They're getting ready for World War III. When people in Seoul, like, it was as if like your uncle had said some just joke during the dinner, and nobody even, they're like, it's just our uncle, whatever. That's the way he is.
Yeah.
So that's actually a pretty interesting story. What I wanted to get into as well is how are expats acclimating towards living in China. I mean, you have I mentioned this earlier while you were gone for a little bit, some of the limitations of living in China. And do you see expats kind of adhering to these and being friendly guests or rebelling against them?
I'd say 99% of the time it's the friendly guests. I very much see myself as as a guest here. Um, I'm never going to be able to, perhaps, when you've had overseas communities that come and migrate to a country like, I don't know, I'm maybe an Asian, a Middle Eastern, or an Islamic person coming to live in the UK. There's already a community. They eventually become part, over the period of time, they're British for one, for all intents and purposes. That will never happen here. I would never ever be considered as kind of part of the community or anything like that. I will always be a guest here, and China wants to keep it that way, and that works for me. It's a good attitude, I think, because it sort of keeps you respectful of the realities of living here. Even I know a lot of people who have Chinese wives or Chinese spouses, Chinese husbands, and even that can be quite a difficult situation as well. You don't automatically get a green card if you are to a Chinese person. So, or anything, or which I think you can kind of get in other countries. There's a whole process to go through to get citizenship. Very, very few people ever do it. So you will always be a guest here. You will never be considered anything like a citizen.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I had the ability and opportunity to take some history of China classes and Chinese culture classes during our MBA, and learning some about the history of China, and stemming from some of the wars where they had problems with foreigners, and humiliation after kind of wars, and so it kind of gave me a better understanding of why they sometimes would like to kind of isolate themselves, or kind of be just kind of taking care of themselves at times, just because of the history. So that is pretty interesting.
Series of expats who have come unstuck, especially in the last couple of weeks, because there's been so I had personally not experienced any anti-foreigner sentiment. I've not experienced any kind of mistreatment. Nobody's been rude to me or anything like that. But you hear a couple of stories on social media about a little bit of anti-foreigner sentiment, because it suits the current agenda to say we've won, we've beaten the virus, and it's only coming back because of all of these people coming back from abroad. Now, you can't stop Chinese nationals coming back to their own country, but you can stop foreigners from coming in. And like I said, it kind of suits to kind of stir that up a little bit. So a lot of foreigners, we're all on our best behavior at the moment, because those that don't, and there's one or two recently that haven't, they're all over the national news, and they're deported in no time at all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, tell us a little bit more about your work life in China. It looks like you were doing global marketing, working with some foreign companies on helping them create marketing and advertising campaigns for the Chinese market at Brandigo over there. Tell us, how did you get your foot in the door, and your experiences of starting working there?
Wow. Okay. So I was a really nerdy kid who really knew what they wanted to be when they were really, really little. I was fascinated by newspapers and fascinated by the media, and I spent a little bit of time working in journalism and things like that. And then that evolved. Unless you're a big writer on a big newspaper, there's not a lot of money or career progression or anything like that. So I discovered the world of PR and marketing, and then I kind of focused on that throughout my bachelor's degree, my internships, my master's degree, all of that kind of thing. Um, Around the time that we made the move to Korea, so I graduated in public relations. That industry doesn't exist anymore with the onset of social media and the type of thing that you're doing now with your podcast and things like that. Having somebody that has to manage coverage in a newspaper and corporate messaging and stuff like that, it just doesn't exist how it did. So you had to broaden your skill sets, but always really been interested in marketing. When I came to Shanghai, there was a market. I originally started marketing a Chinese company to foreign customers. So I was kind of the other way around. So I was working for a Chinese business in the
Mhm.
education sector that owned a couple of schools, and my job was to come up with marketing strategies that would engage with expat communities and foreigners and things like that.
Mhm.
And that was awesome because that gave me a really good insight into how Chinese business works and runs. Because again,
Mhm.
it's quite a different attitude to things, a real different working culture and stuff like that. Um, and then having kind of spent my time doing that for about 4 years, moved down to Shanghai, and I took 3 months off to just be dad when we first
Mhm.
came down to Shanghai. I wasn't really looking for anything. I just finished the master's degree, which I did while I was working in Beijing. And Mike, who's my now boss, kind of was interviewing for a role. I didn't get the role that I interviewed for, and he offered me the directorship based on, I've got 20 years experience working for. It's really nerdy, man. It's none of the glamorous marketing and PR or social media or Instagram or anything like that. I do the nerdy oil companies and banks and
Mhm.
logistics companies and chemical engineering and stuff like that. We don't get any celebrity photo shoots. We don't get any Kardashians when we're doing our
Yeah.
influencer marketing or anything like that. But I like that. This is the side that I've always been
Yeah.
interested in. So,
Yeah.
kind of based on all of that experience, based on my kind of educational background, this opportunity came along and I just went for it. It was something that I felt I could I felt I'd enjoy it. It's a
Mhm.
constant challenge. So now I'm really really lucky. My office is in Shanghai. My other office is in Boston. We have people in both who are really talented people. I'm one of two foreigners. The other foreigner is actually one of the company owners who's in the
Mhm.
Shanghai office. The rest of my team are all Chinese, but they're all hugely talented, and their English is better than my English. Um,
Doesn't
so
take
I
much.
Yeah, I know, right? Um, so I kind of let them sort of do what they're good at, and I focus on the strategic side of things for the agency and for developing new business and new clients for businesses overseas who
That's
want to do social media marketing in China. That was
that's
a super
very cool.
boring bit, but that's how I've ended up kind of doing that.
Yeah. And are there any kind of skill sets, for example, that if you are a foreigner and you come to Shanghai, are there any kind of skill sets that people are looking for in foreigners? For example, maybe different perspective or different kinds of strategies?
Yeah, so I think regardless of what it is, you have to have a very high level of cultural intelligence to come and
Mhm.
work in China, especially if it's within a Chinese organization, because things are so different and attitudes and values are so different. So you have to be able to have the skill set or the flexibility within you to operate in that environment and to be able to work like that. It's part of being an expat I really enjoy is mixing with all these different cultures and things like that.
Mhm.
In terms of the type of roles, um, good. So China is very good at the making and very good at the doing and very good at the selling within China. But for businesses who are looking to expand beyond China, that's where there's opportunities for foreigners to
Mhm.
come in and have a role. The thing about working for China, well, or coming to work in China, is it's quite a complex visa process.
Mhm.
So it's not
Mhm.
quite as easy as some other countries to go. Yet there's very like you have to have a degree. So regardless of what you want to go and do or work in, if you want, unless you're like a top level athlete or something like that, um, you have to have a degree to get a visa, regardless of
Yeah.
yeah,
They would not
you
be
got
letting Kobe Bryant into China without his college degree.
yeah, unless you've been like a top level engineer for 50 years and learned on the job and you're famous in your field, then it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, I guess I mean there's a lot of expats come as a teacher and
Mhm.
they will start off as a teacher and that can be quite the salaries and packages that are on offer for qualified teachers in China um, are are really really attractive. Teachers
Mhm.
get the highest, I think. the only one that comes close would be teaching in Dubai. So,
Mhm.
like I said, if you get into one of the big international schools, you can get a really good, attractive package with flight allowance and healthcare and an apartment that comes with it and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
I know you're mentioning that your wife over there works at one of the international schools, and I was also looking at some opportunities before because I know my friends are living out there as well, and they have really attractive packages for people who are looking to teach in China. And for me, I think that's such a, if you are young and if you're still, you know, looking to explore the world, I can't imagine a better opportunity to see something that is so different than what you're used to, experience a culture that is completely different.
yeah,
Not only will it open up your mind, but you are getting such attractive packages. You mentioned they pay for your flights, you have flight allowance from back and forth, you have summer and winter vacations, you have a lucrative salary, usually comes with a housing allowance. They usually have to give you assistance to help you as soon as you land.
yeah,
I know there are horror stories out there, of course, of private companies, but most of these established companies or schools, they will really offer some fantastic packages for anyone looking to um, to take it that route. And I can only imagine that there's going to be a significant demand because of what recently happened or what's going on of, you know, teachers to come to China.
yeah, for sure. And the other thing is, you are, if you're so be based in Shanghai, there's two international airports on a state of the art subway that will take you there. And excuse me, you are a few hours from Thailand, a few hours from Cambodia, a few hours from Vietnam, Singapore, Japan. You're 8 hours from Bali if you want to kind of know. So it's a real nice hub to then also explore other parts of Asia, Southeast
Mhm.
Asia while you're
Yeah.
here.
Not,
One,
not to mention how big, not to mention how much there is to still see in China. I was there, and
yeah,
I wish I had even more time. I only had a chance to go to, you know, Shanghai, Xi'an, Beijing, but there's just still so much to explore there.
yeah, absolutely. One thing that I will say is the language barrier is quite a challenge in China, more so than anywhere else that I've ever been. Not so much in Shanghai, but even in Beijing to some extent. The sooner you can get a basic grasp of Mandarin, the way your life will be much easier. And it's not like, you and I were both in Seoul, and the level of people speaking English was, everywhere. And like I said, they speak English better than me.
Mhm.
But you won't get that in China. There is
Mhm.
a significant language barrier here, so learning a little bit of the language is absolutely paramount, I think, to have
Yeah.
an easier time with it.
Yeah, and it's also fun to learn new languages. Of course, I remember when I was doing my Chinese course, I actually had such a blast of learning something in Chinese, and then trying to go to the supermarket and or going to the restaurant and saying "Fu Wan, yi tong duo xiao qian," and they'd be like,
Yeah,
I don't even know if I'm saying it properly now, but I would be like, "How much
that's
is
not
this?"
bad. That's not bad.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. I think that's one of the perks, of course, of going abroad is like you get to, you know, learn the language, and people really
Yeah,
appreciate. I mean, that's like I have like those 4 lines in Chinese that I could say, like what my name is and how much something is. Then they respond to me, and I'm like, all right, that's all I know. But people really appreciate you can take that effort to kind of learn a little bit. It means, you know, you're respecting the local culture and the local language.
yeah.
So so for somebody looking to get a job in China and wants to kind of take this opportunity to maybe do it for a year or two, or even advance their career, or just to have something different for a little bit, where should they look for jobs? Because I know there's like lots of postings, and one of the most difficult things I think of taking a job in China or somewhere abroad is how do you know who to trust, and how do you know where to go for this?
So there's levels to this. If you have a specific, so I was fortunate in that I had a specific skill set that was in demand. So I was able to make contact with a potential employer who was willing to bring me in on what's called a Z visa, which is a foreign expert visa. Um,
Mhm.
so it was very smooth for me to kind of land here. It was a skill set that they had a strong argument that a local person couldn't do the job, so they needed a foreign hire to come in and do it.
Mhm.
And thankfully, I'm very grateful it was me that got that role.
Mm.
And I've continued on that visa. And so it's like a lot of things, once you're here, it gets a lot easier to then transfer around. Same for teachers. If you want to come and teach and it's a reputable school, they will not be telling you to work with a visa agent. They will not be telling you to just come on a tourist visa and do this, this, and this. A reputable education establishment or any business will have a HR person who will walk you through that visa process with you.
Mm.
So that's one of the things that I would always kind of say, be mindful when you're kind of seeing how good the opportunity is, ask questions about the visa. Because if you come unstuck, and this has happened to teachers in language training centers like the Hagwons in Korea,
Mm.
your visa's on you. It
Mm.
won't be your company that get into trouble. It'll be you'll be on the next plane, deported with a 10-year ban from ever
Mm.
becoming back in and whatever else they manage to punish you with. So don't like ask questions about the visa, and a reputable company will have a HR person who's an expert in doing that.
Mm. Okay.
What a lot of people do, if it's not necessarily a teaching career that you want to come and do, a lot of people will come and maybe for the first 3 months enroll in a language school, so that you can come on a student visa, spend 3 months learning Chinese, and then if you kind of look for opportunities. So I've hired people in the past who are expat hires. They're already here. They're going through the language school process, and then we just have to work on switching it from a student visa to the relevant visa that they did. You're
Mhm.
not allowed to work on a student visa. You're not allowed to work on a spousal visa as well. So it's kind of a dull thing to have to worry about, but in a country that is quite as bureaucratic as China is, visas are super key, and you want to be challenging the person who's offering you the visa, making sure you know the ins and out of your visa as well.
Mhm. Mhm. That's a really good advice as well about making sure that, you know, I think you can get a pretty good gut instinct when you have companies or schools that are reaching out to you and telling you to do things that are illegal in order for you to get there. Then you can already start getting an understanding of how they're going to be operating, and you can start asking questions. The other thing that I would do is I would ask to speak with an expat or a foreigner that's already living there. You know, hopefully you can get a good sense that they're being honest with you of what the conditions are. And sometimes they will tell you like, hey, it's really not how they advertise it. So definitely,
sure.
definitely do your due diligence before you take that commitment of going abroad and joining a school. The more reputable, of course, the better. But do your due diligence, because you hear horror stories all the time of people taking teaching jobs in Korea or China, and it just turns out a disaster. So that's why I always ask that question, because it is a tricky path to navigate when you're trying to do it, because you're already taking on a risk, you're already nervous, and then, you know, having that on top of everything is a huge bummer that can kind of, you know, cancel everything that you were going to plan to do. So
yeah, for sure. And then having said that about all the visa stuff as well, like it is hard to get into China. There's a lot of paperwork to get here. Bringing my parents over is a nightmare in terms of getting paperwork and visas and stuff like that. But once you're here, there are opportunities in all sorts of different industries and different fields for all kinds of different skills. There's a very much like an entrepreneurial spirit within the expat community that you get here. You know, a lot of people turn up as teachers and now they own a chain of restaurants. Or there's one guy I know who's doing really well by making his own sausages, and he sells hundreds of thousands of sausages in all the cities in China to all the expats who live there, and like proper bacon and stuff like that. There's a guy who does retro football shirts. I've bought like 4 off him recently, right? So he's got himself a factory, and he has all the connections, and he has the shipping, and he's set up a really great little business doing made to order retro football shirts. So it's, you know, in terms of what opportunities are out there, the list is endless. It's just getting here that can be the challenge.
Yeah, and I agree with you. When I was in Shanghai, I actually had an opportunity to go to some networking events and meet some of these startup and entrepreneurial people, and that's the same vibe I got. Everyone kind of had really high spirits to, you know, start their own thing, and, you know, China is just such a massive market, and if you could bring something that's unique and creative that no one else is doing, I mean, you have a massive 1.4 billion population potential. If you can even sell something for, I mean, think about the multinational companies. If you can sell something for a couple dollars to, people in China, I mean, these are huge, huge sums of money
Yeah.
that's available out there. So I agree with you, and I also met a lot of people that came originally as teachers, and from there they kind of branched out as well. Some went into journalism because different opportunities end up presenting themselves to you when you end up living there because of your unique skill set or perspectives. So
I was trying to say, you just said it more succinctly than I said it, but yeah, once you're here, and that's one of the big differences that I found between living in Korea and living in China. So living in Korea as an expat, there were very few, unless you were brought in for a specific project by a company, there were very few expat jobs that weren't within education or
mhm,
teaching or coaching of some description.
mhm.
Whereas in China, it's such a broad spectrum of the
Yeah.
range of opportunities that are on offer.
And that's a reason why I kind of reach out to you to do this show, because it was an interesting industry that you kind of went right into a business thing and doing something kind of non-traditional of not teaching, which is what you usually hear in China. And it's cool that you're using your business skill sets that even if you at some point decide to go back home, you still can transfer those back home, which is just phenomenal. One thing I wanted to ask, which I'm curious about because I haven't worked in China, but I know, for example, when living in Korea, the what is the corporate culture like? Because I know in Korea it was intense. People working long hours. I think they have some of the longest working hours of any country in the world. And there's a huge drinking culture, which was another facet that I wasn't even familiar with. That it would even translate it to us as teachers. Going to the hueshiks of drinking with your boss during every week or whatever it was. And how was the corporate life in China or in Shanghai?
So again, it's kind of varied and it varies where you are as well. So being in Shanghai, the company that I work for has three owners and two are American and one is Chinese. And
Mhm,
we have a very Western culture that perhaps my Chinese teammates have struggled to adapt to a little bit. So
mhm,
when we all had to work from home for 7 weeks, it was fine for me because I'm used to remote working and having a bit of flexibility. Whereas my Chinese colleagues, it was kind of so far out of their comfort zone to not be in a working environment.
mhm,
Some of the big tech companies, um, Jack Ma, who owns Alibaba, he introduced a thing which is kind of like a buzz phrase on social media now, which is the 996. So it's
mhm,
working 9 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, 6 days a week. And that's how you're going to be successful and build a big company and all the rest of it. So some of the kind of the China tech startups that have spinning off into bigger corporations and things like that, they very much have that in place. Um,
mhm.
don't be surprised if everybody's expected to sing a song at the beginning of the day if you're working or kind of doing group group kind of exercises in front of
Yeah.
the office building and stuff like that. A lot of businesses do. Even if you walk outside, there's beauty salons. You'll see all of the beauticians and hairdressers all like lined up, standing to attention, while the hairdressers shouting mantras, and they'll all salute and join in and stuff like that. So but it comes back to what we were talking about combating the virus. It's having that collective. It's being seen as being
Yeah.
part of a greater good. It's a much less individualistic
Mhm.
society in China
Yeah.
than I've experienced everywhere
Yeah.
else. So
And
yeah, depending on the company, the work culture can be quite intense. What I found as a kind of a B2B specialist, I won't necessarily be at my desk from 9 till 6. Like I might go to the gym for a couple of hours during the
mhm,
day, but then I'm working 8 till 10 because
mhm,
so it kind of evens itself out. And you'll see that a lot. You'll see kind of people walking out of the office and taking a longer lunch, but they'll be in the office till 9 o'clock at night as well. So the working day isn't perhaps the most efficiently structured. I mean, you talking about long working hours in Korea. I've heard
mhm.
story. It wasn't the most efficient way of working a lot of
No.
times in some of
Yeah.
those companies. So, yeah, I mean, I've got friends who work in a more traditional Chinese environment and are expected to be long hours, joining all the company activities. Go to KTV with the boss. KTV's the karaoke parlors with the boss afterwards and stuff like that. My personal experience, I haven't had that. The company I work for is like a trendy marketing agency, so we model ourselves on a more Western working practice.
And how is the harmony between, maybe not just at your place, but maybe some of your friends or colleagues that are out there? How is the harmony between the Western staff and the Chinese staff? I know there's huge cultural differences. So are they able to work together, or is there clashes, or how do they integrate these two different kinds of cultures to working towards a collective goal?
What I will say is the onus is going to be on you as the
Mhm.
expat to address that barrier.
Mhm.
For lots of different kind of Chinese people, in my experience, are culturally quite shy. There's also quite a high pressure to be perfect. So even though their English might be fantastic, they'll be embarrassed to come and talk to you in English because they don't want to
Right.
make a mistake, which,
Mhm.
we wouldn't necessarily care, but that's just how they've kind of learned and been brought up and things like that. So it's unusual that a Chinese member of the team will be the person to instigate bridging that gap. It's very much on you as the expat team
Mhm.
member to proactively, join in, ask
Mhm.
questions, be curious, don't be afraid of don't be afraid of everybody laughing at you. Every time I open my mouth, all of our design department just crack up laughing. And I don't know what they're laughing at. And anybody who was a bit more sensitive might get a little bit paranoid about it.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's an embarrassment, it's a shyness, it's a cultural thing. But
Yeah.
being if you're going to integrate it, like I said, it's on me to go to them and be curious and respectful and show interest. It would never come the other way, in my experience.
Yeah, and some of these collective cultures are so ingrained in not only in the work life, but also outside of it. When I was in Korea, for example, I remember like anytime you go eating, you're going to eat in a collective group, right? You're eating Korean barbecue, you're eating, together. You don't order individual like, oh, this is my burger, nobody touch this. It's collective, and that kind of it slowly gets you adjusted to just the new culture. And I remember one of the biggest culture things I had in Korea was during our last semester, one of the children wanted to order some chicken for the classroom or something like that. And I told them all to sit down and take a napkin. And they're like, no, like, why can't we just eat together on this one table? It was just like why not? I guess let's do it. And it was just so foreign to them to have to sit down and eat by themselves on one napkin of one piece of chicken. So that is interesting. About the different cultures and coming into harmony together. So I want to kind of start getting towards the tail end of here, and I want to first of all congratulate you. You just became a father recently,
Recently,
so
I guess.
congratulations on having a child. And to some of our viewers who have families, might be wondering, well, how is it like to raise a family or a child in a completely foreign environment? Can you share some of your experiences with being a new dad in a foreign environment?
So, I guess for us, it's been nothing but positive. There's as when Victoria got pregnant, we were in Beijing, and there was plenty of very good international hospitals to choose from. I think the only country that I've been to that I would have been worried about finding a high level of care was maybe Cambodia, and that was a few years ago. So we were never worried about the medical side of it. We had access to fantastic healthcare professionals. We had access to fantastic facilities, and touch wood, everything with that side of things went smoothly. Um, we found that parents who you know do become parents or bring small children, they're quite a tough bunch of expats, and they stick together and they share advice and help each other out and stuff like that. So there's a really, really good support network as well. Even kind of people who you maybe only know through WeChat chat groups about parent advice and things like that, you'll form a really strong relationship with. um and it's been nothing but positive for us. It's tough. It's hard because you have to sacrifice He doesn't have a relationship with some of his cousins like I had growing up. He sees his grandparents online, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, in for a holiday a couple of times a year. And I find that sad, but he doesn't
Mhm.
really know anything different. The flip side of that is that, so he's 2.5. He is fluent bilingual. He doesn't have my accent. The only thing he says with a Liverpool accent is Play-Doh. Everything else just comes out in this weird, like, mid-Atlantic accent. Um, and he speaks as much Chinese just naturally. Like, he will flip between the two. So if we put him through school here, and we're lucky that Victoria's a teacher and he can go to Victoria's school as of September, by the time
Mhm.
he finishes primary school, he is going to have this experience of living in this culture, which is completely different from his parents' culture. So that, we talked about how we navigate some of that cultural distance. He'll be a natural at it because it's just what he's done. My first holiday with my parents when I was his age was to a caravan, a trailer park in the north of England, like an hour away
Class.
in North Wales. His first holiday was to Bali. And I'm like, you little bastard, you're supposed to, like, kind of earn your way up to that.
Yeah.
So we get to give him all of these experiences that was more difficult for my parents to give me as we were growing up as well. So he's gonna grow up with a much smaller. I, I was gonna say a smaller world. Then it's not. It's a he's gonna have a bigger world than I had growing up, but it will just seem normal to him, and
Yeah.
he's got this ingrained ability to navigate that. One
Yeah.
of the things that I struggle with a little bit is he's still a little bit of a novelty. So
Mhm.
he thankfully he takes after his mum, so he's cute. He blonde hair, blue eyes, and speaks perfect Chinese. So especially if we go out into the countryside or some of the more touristy spots, people want to touch his hair or touch his, take his picture and stuff like that. And Victoria, you remember Victoria? She's tall, blue eyed, and I don't know what color hair she's got because it's different every 5 minutes, but she has the same kind of thing. And this is my problem. People always want to take his picture and things like that. Now, when they come and engage and they chat to me and they chat with him, then that's cool. That's one thing. But it's when you get people kind of shoving you out of the way and just sticking a camera in his
Yeah.
face, I get a little bit Papa Bear with that. Like,
Mhm.
there's been old men with cigarettes who've got up in his face, and I've removed the phone, removed the cigarette, and I've asked what's up when
Mhm.
they do that. But it's my issue dealing with that. They're just being friendly and they're just being curious. But it is a reality, if you, some of my African American friends as well. A lot of people, if you're traveling around China, they won't have seen, some communities won't have seen a white person, some
Mhm.
communities will never have seen a black person. So you are going to get a lot of attention in some of the villages and smaller towns and things like that. But
Mhm.
like I said, it's just, it's a fantastic experience. It's been nothing but positive bringing him into the world in China and bringing him up in China, and hopefully it's going to set him up nicely in the future as well.
Yeah, of course. You start getting a globalized perspective as a child, and I can imagine at those international schools. I mean, you're going to go to school with students from all over the world, and they're
I
just.
am worried. There is one thing that is a constant worry, and it's which
Mhm.
football team he's going to choose. And the amount of money I spend in my team's club shop, I'm hoping that's the investment that's going to make sure we don't have to have that conversation at some point.
Yeah, yeah. That's a discussion you guys will have to get once he gets to that age level.
Not a
Um,
discussion. It's not a
One
discussion.
thing I'm kind of interested on is the language, because I have some friends right now in multicultural relationships. So, for example, French husband with a German wife, and they're trying to navigate how to have the child learn multiple languages as a child while they're still young, and their minds are like a sponge. So, what has been your strategy to helping your child learn Mandarin?
It's so we've always read to him, even when he was like 3 months old.
Mhm.
and he didn't know what we were reading. It's just being around language and being around words. Now, Victoria and I would always use English, and he has what's called an IE, which translates as auntie, pretty much.
Mhm.
So IE is like our, she's our housekeeper, she's his child carer. He loves her to bits, and she loves him, and she just speaks to him in Chinese.
Oh,
So
wow.
ever since the day he was born, he's had Lily speaking only Chinese, and we bought Chinese books and Chinese stories. So when I do story time with him, it's an English book. When Lily does story time, it's a Chinese book. So the nursery rhyme songs that he sings with me and his mum in English, he'll sing the Chinese equivalent with Lily. So it was just something that it's weird when you see him walking down the street. So let's say he's walking down the street with you, he'd be chatting to you in English, and then the security guard on the door, he'll just turn and flip Chinese, and
That's
he's talking in. Now I have to think what I'm going to say, and then think about it in Chinese, and then double check that I've got the tones right, and then say it, kind of thing.
yeah,
So again, the
that's
benefit of bringing a child up as an expat is that language thing. It's just going to be ingrained in him. He
yeah.
he hasn't had to sit down and write the verbs out 10 times and learn how to conjugate it or anything like that. It's just a natural. It's
Mhm.
crazy to see.
And
And he's got
what a gift,
he
what a
started
gift that you
translating.
can, yeah. What a gift that you can give your child, to be able to be bilingual and, having the, to be able to speak two of the most popular languages in the world, to be able to communicate to the population of China and all the English speaking. I mean, that's impressive. And that's such a gift that they will probably not appreciate till they get older. And, they might go to the UK and everyone else is like, why are you speaking funny? Like, what's going on? Like, dude, I can
I
speak
get that
Chinese.
anyway. I used to get that in
So,
London.
yeah.
But I mean, he's blonde, he's got blue eyes, he's cute, he speaks Chinese. We started him in kung fu and dancing lessons. So there's a career in Chinese movies coming up, and Daddy gets a Ferrari, so it's win-win.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, congratulations again on being a father. We're going to start wrapping things up. We went a little bit longer than expected because of the tech difficulties, and we wanted to explain a
Yeah,
little bit
sorry
about
about that.
in Shanghai. So I wanted to thank you today for
My
appearing.
pleasure.
And towards the end, I have 3 quick fire questions I wanted to ask you. Okay.
Okay.
First one is, what is the craziest meal you had in China?
Starfish.
Oof. How was it?
Dry, and a little
Yeah.
bit. But then at the same time, I ate a scorpion and some critics. In Korea, I ate a live octopus, and in Cambodia, I ate a tarantula. So
Uh-huh.
it's all been kind of weird. But yeah, starfish was pretty odd.
Yeah, while you were away on the tech difficulty, I was telling you about one of the strange things I had in China was this fermented black soy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this at
Stinky
all.
tofu.
Stink. Okay, stink. Sorry, it was tofu. That's what it was. It was tofu. Yes. And I remember trying not to be rude, and my Chinese buddy was like, "Just try this, see what you like." And I was just like, "Wow, that was a totally different taste."
One of the things, so like in Shanghai and in Beijing, bullfrog. There's restaurants that specialize in frog, and you'll be kind of with colleagues or co-workers or guests, and they want to treat you as the guest of honor. So the best bit of frog or fish head will be kind of put on your bowl, and you got to go for it. But yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that. Second question. I know you're an avid snowboarder. Favorite place you've been in the world snowboarding?
Easy, Niseko, up in Hokkaido, northern Japan. I went off the back country on my own for 2 days. Didn't see a single other person. The powder up here. That's easy one to answer.
I had a feeling you were going to say that because I remember you raving about how the snowboarding and the amount of powder that was in Japan was something that you've never experienced before. So I had a feeling you were going to say it. I was just curious to see if maybe something else was there. Okay, last question. What is one of the most underrated cities or destinations that you have been to?
Oh, that's a good one. Um, Phnom Penh. Really loved Phnom Penh when we
Mhm.
visited the inn. I'm really big fan of. We've been to Vietnam a few times and always really enjoyed it. But Phnom Penh We went maybe 5 or 6 years ago now, and really felt like a kind of little parts of that city, really undiscovered jewel. Met local taxi drivers who took me to the boxing with his family because he knew I was into boxing and stuff like that. So yeah, I really loved that part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Good. Well, thank you so much on being on our show today. It was such a pleasure. I enjoyed it. I got so excited just talking to you earlier when we were just chatting one-on-one. It made me get goosebumps again thinking about my time in China and how much fun it was and how exciting each weekend was.
You're welcome. Come and stay. We've got a spare room. It's en suite. You have the whole place to yourself. I can't promise you that Iggy's not going to wake you up at 6 o'clock in the morning, but you'd be very welcome to come and pay us a visit.
Yeah, I'll be taking Chinese lessons from a 2-year-old. So that would be a good experience. But yeah, thank you again. I really appreciate it. It was fantastic hearing about your story, hearing about some of your advice for people looking to, if they were interested in working in China. I know you mentioned as well, sometimes you guys look for interns to work for you guys at Brandigo. So feel free to reach out to Steven if you can be of any assistance. And thanks again, and xie xie, and we'll talk again soon.
May Wenty.
Take care. Stay safe, buddy.